Okay, so here we are again with Mr. Mike McGann, the famous, legendary, my father, Mike McGann, and so now we're getting into the tri-pacer year. So this basically where we left off is the introduction of the tri-pacer, and this should be in your first airplane, Dad. So what can you tell us about it?
My first airplane that I bought, and I got it in '67, and probably within 1 month after I soloed, and then got checked out in it. And within 2 or 3 months after that, I bought a house on an airport, and I'm going to show you that. And then took various trips to Astoria. This is the spring of '67 when we moved into our house on Olinger Airport and started flying almost every weekend. This is in the winter there. And one of my favorite trips, well, there's two things about flying an airplane that stick in your mind forever. Number one is when you solo and you take off and all of a sudden you realize you're in the air all by yourself, and your only way you're going to get your little butt down on the ground alive is you're doing it yourself. That's a big one. And then the other one is when you get signed off as a private pilot, which I did just before we moved into Olinger. And this is one of our flights that we took down to Astoria area in the beach in the tri-pacer in '67. It was a great flying airplane. One nice thing about it was the 150 horsepower engine in there, and this particular model had a 10-gallon ox tank under the rear seat. So when you're flying it, you'd have a total of 50 gallons, and that'd give you a bit extra range. And when you ran out of the left tank on the mains, and you'd pump the fuel from the ox tank underneath the rear seat into the left tank. This is landing here at Astoria, and one of the stories here, we landed there, a little bumpy, with Charlene in the plane. And one of our neighbors was showing off there, and he took off and ended up messing up a whole air show, and they banned him from ever going to an air show again. And we had a visit from a guy named Father Milo, and Father Milo was the guy who married us in Greenville, Mississippi, and I told you that story earlier about how I got into flying. And this is taken off out of Olinger, checking the airplane out and all that. I do have one little short story to tell. It isn't this particular one, but my brother-in-law, who was a district attorney in the Dalles, very smart guy, one time came over and visited me. And I said, "Gee, you want to take a flight in the tri-pacer?" He said, "Okay, sure." So he gets into the airplane. We take off, and I look over to the right, and he's sitting there, frozen, staring at the ground in a major panic mode. And I thought, "Do you think we ought to turn around?" He said, "Yeah." I was scared he was going to scream and yell and grab something and wreck the plane, and I made a slow 180 turn and got it back on the ground immediately. And that's the one and only time he's ever been in an airplane. And this is us getting out of the plane at Olinger. The tri-pacer was really an extraordinary airplane in the sense it was known as the flying brick, in the sense that it was kind of slow on takeoff, but once it got in the air it did pretty good. But when you pulled the power back, it would settle really fast into the ground, and you had to be careful that you didn't bump. Well, in our tri-pacer days, and we had these fly-ins, and on one of the fly-ins was Van Grunsman, who was just developing his RVs at that time. He just lived just a little bit to the west of us, and here he is in his RV 1 or 2, coming to our little fly-in here. Yeah, but anyway, here's the RV 2, and got a beautiful airplane. There he is. Finally, we're going to take a trip all the way to the Mississippi in a tri-pacer. And then that day to go, I told Charlene to be in the airplane, because when I came home from work, I want to be able to get in the airplane and take off on Friday afternoon, which we did. And we flew all the way to Boise the first day and spent the night. And then the second day, this is part of the second day, flying over Paradise Lake on the way to Rocky Mountain Airport, which is just past Salt Lake City, about 8,000 it's about 6,000 foot. And the old Tri-Pacer at that altitude wasn't a real fast climber.
And this is your first long distance trip?
Yeah, and we flew it. Then the next day we went all the way to Goodland, Kansas. Tri-Pacer, and leaving Goodland, Kansas, went to Russellville, which is in Arkansas. I got kind of weathered in, and it made it all the way to Greenville. And where Charlene's family was at, took her dad up for a ride in the Tri-Pacer and the family and all that, and then we decided that we were going to go to Arkansas, and so Bubba, which is Charlene's sister's husband, rode with me in the 310 to Arkansas.
Tri-Pacer.
Yeah, the Tri-Pacer. Right, say that. It's hard to move back in the old airplane.
Yeah.
And landed there, and he got so excited about a Tri-Pacer that he ended up buying one and metallized and flew it to Mexico and scared himself and had to give up flying. And then from there in Arkansas we flew down to Baton Rouge and then to Dallas and then on up to Reno and then all the way into Portland and back to home. And we flew that 310 for another year or two.
Tri-Pacer.
I don't know what it is. But
you like the 310, right?
Yeah, the 310. The Tri-Pacer, and we flew it to Rosario's and Friday Harbor and all up in the San Juans, and put many hours on it. And it was a great airplane. Of course, my neighbors, one of them had a Bonanza, and I thought that'd be kind of nice. So I got to looking, and pretty soon I found one.
Ah.
And I kind of miss that Tri-Pacer. It was a solid airplane, even though it only had a dial and pray radio with 10 channels, and so for navigating across country, it was a real challenge.
Well, what did your wife think of that airplane going long distance to Mississippi?
Well, she didn't say much.
Yeah. She was a trooper, right?
You know, she was. She hung in there. It was and we flew it to, one time we flew it to Las Vegas, and for the air races down there, and where they were, barely got the thing off the ground. It was a hot day and 4,500 feet, and we were hanging in the air just maybe 400 or 500 feet off the ground for maybe 10, 12 miles until we would be able to get some more altitude. It was kind of scary. It was a slow climber in hot altitudes. So.
Well, then you got your original, we'll end with this, but you got your original logbook here.
Oh, yes.
With your, your first entry in here or somewhere?
Oh,
or right in there. I think that's your first entry. We can see
Yep.
you got the Cessna 150 above that.
Right.
Pretty cool.
Yep. And all the airplanes I've ever bought, there's always been, I've looked at one and bought it.
Jeez, you've had some good luck.
Yeah, I know.
You've had some good luck. Yeah, so what are these entry dates? So you got...
well, that's in 67.
1967, okay. Yeah.
And so I got the private license test was in September of 67. And that's when I got my private license and was on my way.
All right.
With this.
And then you're getting into the Bonanza years here, and we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah, the Bonanza. I bought the Bonanza from a little tiny 2.5 square inch photograph the guy sent me from New York, and I thought, yeah, that's a pretty good photograph. I'll buy it, and I did.
Oh,